Before we begin, take a moment to settle in. Let your breathing slow. There is nowhere you need to be right now, nothing urgent waiting for your attention. Tonight, we are travelling to one of the most remote places on Earth, to a landscape so vast and white that it seems to exist outside of time. We are going to learn about a home, a simple tent made of wooden poles and reindeer hide, that has sheltered families through Arctic blizzards for thousands of years. This is a story of quiet resilience, of wisdom accumulated over countless generations, of a people who learned not to fight the storm, but to let it pass gently around them. Let the images form slowly in your mind. Let the story carry you. We have all the time we need. There are places on Earth where the land itself seems to resist the presence of human life. Places so vast and exposed that shelter becomes not a luxury, but the fundamental question of survival. The Yamal Peninsula in Siberia is one of these places. It is a finger of land reaching deep into the Arctic Ocean, a flat expanse of tundra that stretches beyond the horizon in every direction. The word tundra comes from Russian, hinting at a treeless mountain tract, but here there are no mountains, only flatness, only white. For more than 9 months of the year, this landscape exists in a state of winter. The ground beneath the snow is permafrost, soil and rock and ice that remains frozen throughout the year, sometimes reaching hundreds of meters deep into the earth. The snow that falls is not deep and soft. The wind, always the wind, scours it away, leaving only a thin layer over the hard, frozen ground. The defining feature of this place is its exposure. There are no forests to break the force of the wind, no valleys to offer protection, no hills to hide behind. The wind here has a name. It is called the purga, or sometimes the metel. It is a horizontal assault of ice and air that can last for days. When the purga comes, it carries with it a fine dust of snow and ice particles. It erases the line between sky and earth. The horizon disappears. The world becomes a single, swirling void of white. To stand in it without shelter is to invite death. Winter here is the dominant condition of existence. During the polar night, the sun does not rise at all. For weeks, the only light comes from the moon, from the cold fire of the stars and from the aurora borealis, which dances in green and violet sheets across the sky. The temperature falls to extremes. -40 degrees Celsius is common. -50 is not unusual. At these temperatures, the air becomes so cold and dry that it feels sharp in the lungs. Metal becomes brittle. Exposed skin freezes in minutes, turning white and waxy. This is the environment, a land of such scale and harshness that it seems to forbid permanence. To build a house of stone or wood here, to sink foundations into the permafrost, would be to condemn yourself to starvation. The food sources here, the plants that grow and the animals that graze, are not concentrated in one place. They move. The land demands movement. To survive here, you cannot stand still. You cannot resist the wind. You must be as mobile as the reindeer that cross this plain, as adaptable as the dwarf willows that bend flat against the ground. The home, therefore, must be something that can travel. It must be light enough to carry, strong enough to withstand the purga, and warm enough to keep a family alive through months of darkness and cold. It must be built from what the land provides, and it must be designed with a wisdom that comes not from a single generation, but from 1,000 years of learning, failure, and refinement. This is the story of that home. The people who live on the Yamal Peninsula are called the Nenets. They are one of the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, and their existence is inseparable from the land and from one animal in particular, the reindeer. The Nenets are a people of the Arctic. Their culture, their language, their spirituality, and their daily survival are all woven into the rhythm of the tundra and the needs of the reindeer herd. The Nenets are nomadic reindeer herders. They do not keep reindeer in the way a farmer keeps cattle in a pen. They follow them. Their lives are a continuous journey, a migration that repeats year after year, covering over 1,000 kilometers. This migration has a name. It is called the Kaslani. The Kaslani is dictated by the needs of the herd. Reindeer survive in the tundra by eating lichen, a slow-growing organism that carpets the ground beneath the snow. The Nenets call it reindeer moss, though it is not a moss at all. In winter, the reindeer dig through the snow with their hooves to reach it. They cannot stay in one place for long. or they will exhaust the fragile supply. The lichen grows slowly, and the herd is large, so they must move, and the Nenets move with them. In the deep winter, the Nenets guide their herds south, toward the edge of the forest tundra, where sparse trees begin to appear and the snow is not as deep. Here, the lichen is easier to reach, and the land offers slightly more shelter from the worst of the wind. The reindeer graze slowly, moving from one patch to the next, and the families follow, setting up camp, staying for a few days or a week, then packing up and moving again. When spring begins to arrive, the migration reverses. The reindeer are driven north, back out onto the open tundra. They are following an ancient instinct, a pull toward the coast of the Arctic Ocean. In summer, the reindeer move to escape the biting insects that swarm in the warmer forested areas. On the open tundra, the coastal breezes offer relief. The time for calving arrives. The Nenets follow them north, camping on the tundra through the brief, bright summer, and then the cycle begins again. The reindeer provides everything. It is the foundation of life. A reindeer can pull a sledge, carrying the family's possessions across the snow. Its meat provides food, and its blood, rich in nutrients, is sometimes drunk warm. Its hide, when scraped and cured, becomes clothing and blankets, and the walls of the home. The fur of the reindeer is hollow, filled with air, making it one of the most effective natural insulators in the world. Boots made from reindeer leg skin, called tobogki, and long coats called malitsas, are the only garments that can truly protect against the sub-zero cold. A family's wealth is measured in reindeer. A large herd means security, the ability to survive hard winters and to provide for children. The relationship between the Nenets and their reindeer is symbiotic, built on respect and deep knowledge. The herders know each animal. They know its temperament, its health, its lineage. They move when the reindeer need to move. They rest when the herd needs to rest. This way of life requires constant adaptation. The Nenets cannot accumulate heavy possessions. Everything they own must be able to fit on a sledge. Their entire world, their home, their tools, their clothing is packed and unpacked hundreds of times each year. There is no room for the unnecessary. Every object must be functional, durable, and repairable. The home they live in must embody these same principles. It must be portable, resilient, and perfectly suited to the conditions of the tundra. It must be a home that can travel. The structure that makes this life possible is called the chum in Russian. In the Nenets' language, it is simply called maya, which means house. It is a conical tent, a form so simple that it appears ancient and timeless. The design has been refined over millennia, passed down through generations, adapted and perfected until it reached a state of near-ideal efficiency. The chum is a masterpiece of engineering, shaped by the demands of one of the harshest environments on Earth. The brilliance of the chum begins with its shape. The cone is the result of careful observation and accumulated knowledge. In the tundra, where the wind is constant and violent, the shape of a structure determines whether it will stand or collapse. A square building, a flat-walled tent would present a solid surface to the wind. The wind would catch against it, pushing and pulling, creating enormous pressure. Snow would pile against the windward side, adding crushing weight. The cone works differently. It has no flat surfaces. No matter which direction the wind comes from, it encounters only a slope. The wind flows up and around the smooth sides of the cone, finding no edge to grip, no surface to batter. The tent yields to the storm, allowing the wind to pass harmlessly around its form. This is an active strategy of survival through cooperation rather than confrontation. The shape also determines how snow behaves around the structure. A flat-sided tent would cause snow to accumulate in drifts against its walls, burying it in weight and cold. The cone sheds snow. The smooth, sloped sides do not give the snow a place to cling. What little does settle can be easily brushed away. When the wind is strong, the snow simply slides or blows off the surface, leaving the structure clear. Inside, the cone creates a natural system of heat management. At the centre of the floor, a fire is built, or in more recent times, a small metal stove is placed. Heat rises. In a conical space, the heat rises from the centre and spreads outward and upward, filling the upper portion of the tent first, then gradually warming the lower areas. The peak of the cone is left open. This opening serves as a smoke hole, allowing smoke to escape while drawing fresh air in from the edges of the tent at ground level. The result is a continuous, gentle circulation of air. The fire stays oxygenated. The smoke is vented. The interior remains warm without becoming stale or suffocating. The stability of the cone comes from its geometry. The base is wide and heavy. The peak is a single point. The poles that form the skeleton all lean inward, bracing against one another in a circle. Each pole supports the others. The structure is interdependent. It cannot be easily tipped because its weight and its forces are distributed evenly. When the covering is added, the structure becomes even more stable. The covering is heavy, made from thick reindeer hide. This weight anchors the tent to the ground, pressing the base of the poles into the snow and ice. The chum is more than a physical shelter. In Nenet's culture, it is the centre of life. It is the place where children are born, where families gather, where decisions are made. It is a sacred space. The interior is organised according to principles that reflect the Nenet's understanding of the world. The smoke hole at the top is seen as a connection to the heavens. The hearth at the centre is the heart of the world. To build a chum is to recreate the cosmos in miniature, to establish order and warmth in the midst of chaos and cold. A chum is made from two main components, the skeleton and the skin. The skeleton is the frame, and it is made from poles. These poles are not minor elements. They are long, straight and smooth, each one carefully selected and prepared. A full set for a family-sized chum requires between 30 and 40 poles. In a land defined by the absence of trees, these poles are an immense treasure. The Nenets do not find these poles on the open tundra. There are no trees there, only low shrubs and grasses, dwarf willows that grow flat against the ground, never reaching more than a few centimetres in height. For wood, for the precious material that will form the bones of their home, the Nenets must travel to the southern part of their migration route, to the place where the open tundra gives way to the forest tundra, the transitional zone where the taiga begins. This journey to harvest poles is part of the winter migration. As the family moves south in late autumn following the reindeer toward better grazing, they enter a landscape that is different from the open plain. Here, trees begin to appear. At first, they are small and scattered, lonely individuals standing against the wind. Then they become more numerous, forming sparse groves. These are the outermost edges of the boreal forest, the great belt of conifers that circles the Arctic. The trees here are not tall or thick. They are stunted by the cold, by the short growing season, by the thin soil and the permafrost beneath. A tree that might grow 30 metres tall in a warmer climate will grow only 3 or 4 metres here, its trunk gnarled and twisted by the wind. But they are trees nonetheless, and they provide the wood that the Nenets need. The harvest happens in winter, when the sap has retreated and the wood is dormant. The men walk through the sparse forest, examining the trees, looking for candidates. They are searching for specific characteristics. The trunk must be straight, without excessive bends or curves. It must be of the right diameter, thick enough to be strong, but not so thick that it becomes too heavy to carry. It must be free of major knots or branches, which would create weak points in the finished pole. The preferred species is larch. Larch is a deciduous conifer, unusual in that it drops its needles each autumn. The wood is dense and strong, resistant to rot, and it does not become brittle in the extreme cold the way some woods do. It has a natural resin content that helps preserve it, protecting it from moisture and decay. A larch pole, properly cared for, can last for generations. Birch is also used, though it is considered slightly inferior. Birch is less dense than larch, more prone to cracking and splitting over time, but it is more common in some areas, and when larch cannot be found, birch will serve. When a suitable tree is identified, the work begins. The men use axes, simple tools with steel heads and wooden handles, worn smooth by years of use. The tree is felled, with careful, deliberate strokes. The axe bites into the wood, sending chips of frozen bark and pale wood flying. The work is hard, and in the cold the men must pace themselves, pausing frequently to catch their breath, to prevent overheating inside their heavy fur coats. When the tree falls, it is examined more closely. Sometimes a tree that looked promising while standing reveals flaws once it is on the ground. A hidden crack, a section of rot, a curve that was not visible from below. If the tree is unusable, it is left where it fell and the search continues. If the tree is good, the work of processing begins. The branches are removed first, cut away close to the trunk, This is done carefully to avoid damaging the wood of the trunk itself. Each branch leaves a small knot, a place where the grain of the wood is disrupted. Too many knots will weaken the pole, so trees with many branches are avoided. The best trees are those that grew straight and tall with few side branches, their energy focused on upward growth rather than spreading outward. Once the branches are removed, the trunk is cut to length. The poles must be long enough to reach from the ground to the peak of the chum with enough overlap at the top to interlock securely. This means they must be at least 6 meters long, sometimes longer. The trunk is measured by eye, using the span of a man's outstretched arms as a rough guide. When the proper length is determined, the trunk is cut again, and a new pole is born. The bark must be removed. This is done with a draw knife, a simple tool with a blade set between two handles. The bark of larch is thick and rough, and it must be stripped away to reveal the smooth wood beneath. The man sits with the pole braced against his legs or between two supports, and he draws the knife toward himself, shaving away the bark in long strips. The work is rhythmic, meditative. The bark peels away, curling and falling to the snow, revealing the pale, clean wood. Beneath the bark, the wood is slightly rough, marked by the grain, by the growth rings that tell the story of the tree's life. Each ring represents 1 year of growth. In good years, when the summer was long and warm, the rings are wide. In hard years, when the cold came early or the rain did not come at all, the rings are narrow, compressed together. A man can read the history of the climate in the wood of a tree, can see the pattern of good years and bad years stretching back decades. The pole is then smoothed. This is done with a scraper, or sometimes with a piece of rough stone rubbing along the length of the wood, removing the last roughness, bringing the surface to a smooth, even finish. This work takes time. It cannot be rushed. The pole must be smooth enough that it will not splinter or catch on the hide of the nuke, smooth enough that it can be handled without gloves, smooth enough that it will last. When a pole is finished, it is set aside, and the work begins on the next one. A rare, full set of 30 to 40 poles represents weeks of work. The men work together, cooperating, sharing the labour. One man might fell the trees while another strips the bark. A third smooths the poles while a fourth begins work on new trees. The work is hard, but it is also satisfying. The pile of finished poles grows slowly, each one a small victory, each one a piece of the home taking shape. The finished poles are gathered and lashed together in a bundle, tied with strong rope. The bundle is heavy, almost impossibly heavy. A full set of poles can weigh several hundred kilograms. It requires multiple reindeer to pull the load, and even then, the sledge moves slowly, groaning under the weight. But the poles are precious. They are worth the effort. They are the foundation of the home, and without them the family cannot survive. The poles are not disposable. They are not cut each year and replaced. They are heirlooms, objects of deep value that are passed from one generation to the next. A father gives his poles to his son, and the son will one day give them to his own son. A set of poles might be used for 50 years, for 100 years, passed down through 3 or 4 generations, carried thousands of kilometers across the tundra, raised and lowered hundreds of times. Over time, the poles develop character. They become worn smooth by handling, polished by the friction of countless assemblies and disassemblies. They darken slightly, the wood taking on a rich, deep colour from exposure to smoke and weather. They acquire small marks and scratches, each one a memory, a story. This pole was damaged in a storm, and here is where it was repaired. That pole fell once and hit a rock, and here is the dent it received. These marks do not diminish the value of the poles, they enhance it. They are proof of use, proof of survival, proof of continuity. 2 of the poles in every set are more important than the others. These are the sacred poles of the chum. They are the first to be raised when building begins, forming the initial tripod that anchors the entire structure. They are treated with particular respect and reverence. They are seen as representing the family line itself, the continuity of generations, the unbroken thread that connects the present to the past and to the future. The sacred poles are never left lying on the ground carelessly. They are never used for any purpose other than building the chum. They are not leaned against trees, not used as supports for other things, not treated as ordinary tools. When the chum is dismantled, these poles are the last to be taken down, and when the chum is built, they are the first to be raised. When they are carried on the sledge, They are positioned carefully, protected from damage, wrapped in hide or cloth to prevent them from being scratched or dented. To lose a sacred pole would be a serious misfortune, both practical and spiritual. Practically, a new pole would have to be cut and prepared, which requires time and effort. Spiritually, the loss would represent a break in the continuity of the family, a severing of the connection to the ancestors. The sacred poles carry the spirit of the family, the accumulated blessing of all those who have lived in the chum before. To lose them would be to lose part of the family's identity. The length and diameter of the poles determine the size of the chum. A typical family chum, designed to house a family of 4 to 6 people, stands over 5 meters tall when fully erected, with a base diameter of 9 meters or more. The poles must be long enough to reach from the ground to the peak, with enough overlap at the top to form a stable apex. They must be thick enough to be strong, to support the weight of the enyaq and to resist the force of the wind, but not so thick that they become too heavy to carry or too difficult to work with. The dimensions are not arbitrary. They are the result of generations of refinement, of trial and error, of accumulated knowledge about what works and what does not. A chum that is too small will be cramped and uncomfortable, with insufficient space for the family to live and work. A chum that is too large will be difficult to heat, requiring too much fuel to keep warm, and it will be unstable in high winds, presenting too much surface area to the storm. The size that has been settled upon, passed down through generations, represents the optimal balance between space, stability, and efficiency. The wood itself must have certain qualities. It must be strong enough to bear weight and resist bending, but also flexible enough to withstand the stress of repeated assembly and disassembly without cracking. It must be able to endure temperature extremes, from 50 degrees below zero in winter to 20 degrees above in summer, without becoming brittle or warping. It must resist rot and decay, even when exposed to moisture and the freeze-thaw cycles of spring and autumn. Larch possesses all these qualities. It is dense and strong, with a tight grain that resists splitting. It has natural oils and resins that protect it from moisture and decay. It does not become brittle in extreme cold the way some hardwoods do. A larch pole can be bent slightly under load without breaking, and it will spring back to its original shape when the load is removed. This flexibility is crucial. During a storm, the poles of the chum will flex and sway slightly under the force of the wind, absorbing the energy rather than resisting it rigidly. A rigid pole would snap. A flexible pole survives. The Nenets treat their poles with great care. When the chum is erected, the placement of each pole is done with precision. The women who build the chum do not measure with rulers or strings. They do not count paces or use tools to mark angles. They know by sight and by feel where each pole should go. They have built the chum so many times that the knowledge is in their hands, in their bodies, in their instinctive sense, of balance and proportion. A young girl learns to handle the poles by watching her mother and grandmother. She begins to help at a young age, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. At first, her help is minimal. She might carry small items or hold a rope while the adults work, but she is watching, always watching, absorbing the process. As she grows older, she takes on more responsibility. She learns how to lash the poles to the sledge for transport. She learns how to lift them without dropping them, how to position them in the tripod, how to fan them out to form the perfect circle. By the time she's a teenager, she can build a chum on her own, or with the help of one other person. The knowledge has been transmitted without words, without instruction, simply by doing over and over until the movements become automatic. This is how knowledge is preserved among the Nenets, not in books or written instructions, but in practice, in repetition, in the embodied wisdom of hands that have done the same work for generations. The poles are more than functional objects. They are symbols. They represent stability in a life of constant movement. They are the one permanent element in a nomadic existence, the one thing that remains constant even as everything else changes. The landscape changes, the seasons change, the camps change, but the poles remain. They are the same poles that were raised yesterday and will be raised tomorrow. They are the thread that connects one place to another, one season to another, one generation to another. When a man holds one of his sacred poles, when he runs his hand along its smooth surface, he is touching the same wood that his father touched, and his grandfather before him. He is connected physically and spiritually to those who came before. The pole is a vessel of memory, a carrier of tradition, a tangible link to the past. It is not just a piece of wood, it is a piece of the family, a piece of the home, a piece of the soul. The poles are the bones of the home. They provide the structure, the shape, the strength. Without them, the chum cannot exist. The nuke, the covering, is important, but it is the poles that make the chum stand. It is the poles that define the space, that create the cone, that hold everything together. They are the foundation, the framework, the skeleton upon which the rest of the home is built. And so, when the family travels south each winter to the forest tundra, when the men walk among the sparse trees looking for straight, strong trunks, they are not simply gathering materials, they are gathering the future. They are ensuring that their home can continue to stand, that their children will have shelter, that the tradition can continue for another generation. The poles are cut with care, prepared with respect, and carried with reverence. They are quite simply irreplaceable. The covering of the chum is called the snuke. It is what transforms the skeleton of poles into a home. The snuke is made from reindeer hide, and it is the product of immense labour and skill. It is sewn by the women of the family, a task that requires strength, patience, and deep knowledge of materials and technique. A single winter nuke requires the hides of 40 to 60 reindeer. These are not just any hides. They must be from reindeer slaughtered in late autumn or early winter, when the fur is thick and the hide is in the best condition. The hides are scraped clean of fat and flesh, then cured and softened. This is a lengthy process. Each hide must be worked by hand, stretched, beaten and treated, until it is pliable enough to be sewn, but still strong enough to withstand the wind and cold. The hides are then sewn together using thread made from reindeer sinew. Sinew is incredibly strong and does not rot or break easily. The stitching must be tight and even, with no gaps that could let in wind or snow. A single enyok is made in 2 large sections, each semicircular in shape. These 2 halves will overlap when wrapped around the frame, creating a double layer at the seams for extra insulation and protection. The most important feature of the nuke is the orientation of the fur. The fur is left on the hide, and it is sewn so that the fur faces outward. To someone unfamiliar with the design, this seems counterintuitive. In most cultures, fur is worn with the soft side against the skin for comfort. The Nenets do the opposite, and the reason is rooted in the physics of survival. Reindeer fur is made of hollow hairs. Each individual hair is a tiny tube filled with air. This makes the fur an extraordinarily effective insulator. By placing the fur on the outside of the chum, the Nenets create an insulating barrier between the warm interior and the freezing air outside. The hollow hairs trap a layer of air against the surface of the hide, preventing heat from escaping. The fur-out design has another critical advantage. When snow falls on the chum during a blizzard, it does not melt against the hide and then refreeze into a solid sheet of ice. Ice conducts cold efficiently and adds tremendous weight. Instead, the snow lands on the surface of the fur, where it remains powdery and loose. The air trapped in the hollow hairs keeps the surface of the fur cold, preventing the snow from melting. In the morning, the family can simply brush the snow off the enyuk with a few sweeps of a hand or a stick. The tent remains light, flexible and well insulated. The weight of the enyuk is substantial. A full winter covering can weigh several hundred pounds. The heavy enyuk presses down on the frame, anchoring the poles to the ground. It increases the overall stability of the structure. In high winds, a lightweight tent would be at risk of being lifted or blown over. The chum, heavy with reindeer hide, sits firmly on the tundra, resisting even the strongest gusts. In summer, this heavy covering is stored away. It is replaced with a lighter covering, traditionally made from sections of birch bark that have been boiled and sewn together, or in more recent times from canvas. The summer covering is designed to repel rain and provide shade. When autumn arrives and the temperatures begin to fall, the winter nuke is brought out again, inspected for damage, repaired if necessary, and wrapped once more around the poles. The nuke is a work of art, a repository of knowledge, and a symbol of the women's skill and dedication. To sew a nuke is to participate in a tradition that stretches back through countless generations. The patterns of stitching, the methods of preparing the hides, the knowledge of which part of the reindeer produces the best fur for which part of the tent. All of this is passed down from mother to daughter. It is knowledge held in the hands and in the memory, learned from doing over and over until the movements become instinctive. Building a chum is a ritual, practiced so many times that it becomes almost automatic. It is primarily the work of the women, though men may assist with the heavier tasks. An experienced team of 2 or 3 women can erect a complete chum in less than an hour, even in a driving wind. The process is efficient, deliberate, and silent. There is no need for discussion or debate. Each woman knows her role. Each step follows naturally from the one before. The first task is to choose a suitable location. The women look for a flat area with a firm base. If the ground is covered in deep, loose snow, they will avoid it. Packed snow or cleared ground is preferable. The tent must sit level, or the interior will be uncomfortable and the structure less stable. The direction of the prevailing wind is also considered. The entrance of the chum will be positioned to avoid facing directly into the wind. Once the spot is chosen, the next decision is where to place the stove. In modern times, most Nenets families use a small, efficient metal stove with a stovepipe. In earlier generations, an open hearth was used. The stove or fire is the heart of the home. It is the source of warmth, the place where food is cooked, where water is melted from snow, where tea is brewed. Everything else is built around it. The stove will be placed in the exact centre of the floor. The entire chum will rise around this central point. The construction begins with the poles. The 2 sacred poles are brought first. A third pole is selected, and the 3 are laid on the ground with their tips overlapping. The women lift the 3 together, raising them until they form a stable tripod. The tips interlock at the top, creating the first point of the cone. This is the seed from which the entire structure will grow. The base of the tripod is spread out to create a wide circle. The other poles are brought one by one and laid into the V-shaped notch formed by the tripod at the top. Each pole is positioned carefully, fanning out to form the circumference of the cone. The women move quickly but without haste. They know by experience where each pole should go to create a perfect circle. They do not measure. They do not mark the ground. The knowledge is in their hands and in their eyes. As more poles are added, the skeleton takes shape. The poles lean inward, each one bracing against the others. The frame becomes rigid, held together by the interlocking pressure of the poles themselves. The base of each pole rests on the ground, and the weight of the structure presses them into the snow or soil. By the time all the poles are in place, the skeleton is stable enough to stand unsupported. The next step is the most dramatic. The nuke is brought from the sledge. It is heavy, and it takes 2 or more women to handle it. The first half, the section that will face the prevailing wind, is unfolded and draped over a long pole. This pole is used to lift the enyuk up and over the frame. The women pull and adjust the covering, guiding it into place. The hide is wrapped around the skeleton, covering roughly half of the cone. The second half of the nuke is brought and positioned over the first, overlapping generously at the edges. The 2 halves meet at the entrance, creating a doorway. The overlapping design ensures that there are no gaps, no seams where wind or snow can penetrate. The women secure the enyuk with long ropes that are tied around the outside, cinching the covering tightly to the frame. A decorative belt, often embroidered with traditional patterns, is wrapped around the middle of the chum, adding both beauty and additional security. The final touches are made. A special pole, called the chest, is left leaning against the outside of the chum. This pole is used to adjust the flaps at the top of the smoke hole. By propping the chest against one flap or the other, the family can control the size and direction of the opening, managing ventilation and smoke depending on the wind conditions. Inside, the floor is prepared. First, a layer of poles or wooden boards is laid down, creating an air gap between the frozen ground and the living space. This gap prevents cold from seeping up through the floor. On top of this base layer, thick reindeer furs are spread out, fur side up. These furs are soft, warm, and insulating. They are the family's carpet, their chairs, and their beds. The stove is brought in and positioned at the centre. The stovepipe is fitted and extended up through the smoke hole. A small fire is lit, and within minutes, the first thin wisp of smoke rises into the air. The chum is complete. What was a pile of poles and hide on a sledge an hour ago is now a warm, enclosed space. The family can step inside, out of the wind, out of the cold, and into the shelter of home. To step inside the chum from the outside world is to experience a profound transition. The change is immediate and complete. Outside, the tundra is a realm of light and wind. The sky is vast, the horizon endless, the air sharp and cold. Inside, the world contracts and softens. The roaring wind becomes a high, distant whisper. The harsh, blue-white light of the snow gives way to a warm, amber glow. The transition happens in stages. First, there is the doorway itself. The entrance to the chum is a simple flap of hide, heavy and stiff with cold on winter days, more pliable in summer. To enter, you lift this flap and duck low, bending almost double to pass through. For a moment, you're in both worlds at once. Your head and shoulders are in the warmth, breathing the smell of smoke and hide and tea, while your legs are still outside, feeling the bite of the wind. Then you step fully through, and the flap falls behind you, and the outside world is sealed away. It is considered improper to stand in the doorway or to linger there. The entrance is a threshold, a boundary between the sacred interior and the profane exterior, and it should be crossed with respect and intention. Upon entering, a person turns immediately to the left or right, moving out of the direct line between the door and the selm, the sacred space opposite. To block this line, even momentarily, is to interrupt the flow of energy and respect that connects the entrance to the heart of the home. The first sensation inside is warmth, not the sudden overwhelming heat of a modern heated room, but a gentle, enveloping warmth that seeps into the skin gradually. The air is several degrees warmer than outside, sometimes 10 or 20 degrees warmer, depending on how cold it is beyond the hide walls. But more than the temperature, it is the quality of the warmth that strikes you. It is soft, steady, and radiant, emanating from the stove at the centre and spreading outward in all directions. The second sensation is the change in sound. Outside, the wind may be a constant roar, a presence so loud and pervasive that it becomes difficult to think. Inside, that roar is instantly muted. The thick hide of the nuke, especially the winter covering with its layers of fur, absorbs and dampens the sound. What was a roar becomes a whisper, a high, distant keen that sits at the edge of hearing. It is present, but it is no longer dominant. The sounds of the interior, the crackle of the fire, the murmur of voices, the small movements of people on the furs, these become the primary soundscape. The third sensation is the light. Outside, the light of the tundra is harsh and bright, reflecting off the snow with an intensity that can be blinding. Inside the chum, the light is dim and golden. During the day, some light filters through the hide itself. Reindeer hide is not opaque. It is thick, but it allows a diffuse, amber-coloured light to pass through. The entire interior glows with this soft, warm illumination. It is the colour of honey, of late afternoon sun, of candle flame. It is a light that does not hurt the eyes, that invites rest rather than activity. At night, or during the polar darkness of deep winter when the sun does not rise at all, the only light comes from the fire. The stove sits in the exact centre of the floor and the flames inside cast flickering shadows on the walls. The light moves and dances, creating patterns on the sloped hide, making the interior feel alive, as if the chum itself is breathing. The smoke hole at the peak of the cone is a circle of darkness or a faint starlight, depending on the time and the weather. It is a window to the sky, a connection to the world beyond, but it is high above and does not disturb the sense of enclosure and safety below. The source of the warmth and light is the stove. It sits in the centre of the floor, radiating a steady, gentle heat. The metal of the stove glows faintly red where the fire burns hottest. The stovepipe extends upward, disappearing through the smoke hole at the peak of the cone. The fire is small, efficient, burning dry wood or sometimes dried willow branches collected during the summer. The heat it produces is constant, and in the enclosed space of the chum, it is more than sufficient. The stove is not just a tool. It is the heart of the home. It is the source of life in the frozen landscape. The air inside carries the scents of the tundra and the life of the family. There is the faint, pleasant smell of wood smoke, not the acrid, choking smoke of a poorly vented fire, but the clean, light smoke of well-seasoned wood burning in a well-designed stove. The smoke is drawn up and out through the peak, and what remains in the air is just a trace, a ghost of the fire, more comforting than intrusive. There is the earthy, leathery scent of the reindeer hides that line the floor and walls. It is a smell of the animal, of the land, of work and care and tradition. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of home. If tea is brewing on the stove, the air is touched with the aroma of hot water and whatever herbs or additives the family uses. The Nenets often add salt to their tea, or a small piece of butter or fat, and these scents mingle with the wood smoke and the hide. If food is being cooked, the smell of a meat or fish mingles with the other scents, creating a rich, layered atmosphere. These are not the smells of a sterile, climate-controlled space. They are the smells of warmth and life, of a space where people live and work and rest, where the boundary between human and animal and land is blurred and permeable. The floor is soft underfoot. The layers of reindeer fur provide a cushion against the hard ground beneath. The fur is thick and resilient, and it holds warmth. To sit or lie on it is to feel immediately insulated from the cold of the earth. The permafrost, frozen solid beneath the tent, cannot reach up through the layers of wood and fur. The floor is a living surface, soft and yielding, a place where children can roll and play without fear of injury, where adults can sit for hours without discomfort. The fur is beautiful. Each pelt has natural variations in colour, from cream to brown to grey, and the arrangement of the pelts across the floor creates a patchwork of subtle tones. The fur is dense and plush, the individual hairs catching the light from the fire and glowing softly. To run your hand across it is to feel a kind of luxury, a softness that seems impossible in this harsh environment. The fur is arranged with care, overlapping to cover the entire floor space, with no gaps where the cold might seep through. The interior of the chum is highly organised, reflecting a deep cultural logic that has been refined over generations. The space is circular, defined by the cone of the structure, but within this circle there is a clear division of areas, each with its own purpose and meaning. This organisation is not arbitrary. It is a map of the cosmos, a reflection of the Nenets' understanding of the world and their place in it. Directly opposite the entrance, behind the stove, is the most sacred part of the chum. The Nenets call this space the sea. It is the family's holy ground, the place where the spiritual and the material world meet. Here, they keep their sacred sledges, small carved objects made from wood or bone that represent protective spirits. These sledges are not toys. They are powerful objects, vessels for the forces that watch over the family and the herd. Here, they may also place icons or amulets, any items of spiritual importance, things inherited from parents or grandparents, things that carry power and memory. The sea is a space of respect and restriction. No one walks between the fire and the sium. To do so would be to interrupt the sacred line that connects the heart of the home to the gateway to the heavens. No one points their feet toward the sea when sitting or lying down. The feet are the lowest part of the body, the part that touches the earth, and to point them toward the sacred space would be a profound disrespect. Children are taught these rules from their earliest days. They learn to move around the SE, to give it space, to honour it with their actions, even if they do not yet fully understand its meaning. The SE is also the place where honoured guests are invited to sit. When a visitor enters the chum, if they are respected, if they are elders or family, they are directed to sit near the sea, with their backs to the sacred space, facing the fire and the rest of the family. This is the place of honour, the warmest spot, the most protected position. To be invited to sit near the SE is to be welcomed fully into the family's world. The chum is divided into two halves by an invisible line that runs from the entrance through the fire to the SI. To the right of the entrance, if you're standing at the sea and facing outward toward the door, is the woman's side. This is called the Mia Kaya. It is her domain, her workspace, the area where she keeps the tools and materials necessary for maintaining the household and the family. This is not a rigid or oppressive division. It is a practical one, a way of organising the limited space so that everything has its place and can be found easily. On the woman's side, you will find containers for food. There are bags made of reindeer hide or cloth, sewn with care and often decorated with simple patterns. These bags hold dried meat, strips of reindeer or fish that have been preserved by smoking or drying in the cold, dry air of winter. There are bags of flour, precious and carefully rationed, used for making simple flatbreads on the stove. There are bags of tea, the leaves or herbs that will be brewed throughout the day, the constant companion of a life in the chum. There are sewing kits, small bundles wrapped in hide or fabric, containing needles made from bone, thread made from reindeer sinew, and scraps of hide for patches and repairs. The needles are precious, carved with care, polished smooth by use. The sinew is strong and durable, the only thread that can withstand the constant stress of life on the tundra. The woman's hands are always busy with this work. There is always something that needs repair, a seam that has come loose, a tear that has opened, a button that has fallen off. There are insulated bags for keeping tea warm, clever constructions of fur and hide that can keep a pot of tea hot for hours. There are wooden bowls and cups, simple and undecorated, functional and durable. There are spoons carved from wood or bone. There are knives for cutting meat and preparing food. Everything is organised and accessible, arranged so that the woman can reach what she needs without leaving her place by the fire, without disrupting the flow of life in the small space. The other side of the chum, to the left of the entrance, is traditionally the man's side. This is where he keeps his tools, the implements he uses for working with the herd and maintaining the family's equipment. There are knives for butchering, larger and heavier than the knives used for food preparation. There are tools for working with wood and bone, small saws and files and scrapers. There are pieces of reindeer antler in various stages of being carved into buttons, toggles, knife handles, or decorative items. The man's side is also where he keeps his personal items, his tobacco if he has any, his fire-starting kit, his small carvings and half-finished projects. This is his space, his domain, and it is respected by the rest of the family. The children do not go through his things. The woman does not rearrange his tools. The division is not absolute, and there is flexibility and overlap, but it provides order and clarity in a small space where people live in close proximity for months at a time. The division of space is about more than just practicality. It is about identity and role. The woman's work is centred on the interior, on maintaining the home, preparing food, making and repairing clothing, caring for the children. The man's work is centred more on the exterior, on the herd, on hunting, on making and repairing the larger tools and equipment. But both are inside the chum together. Both are part of the same circle. Both are necessary for survival. The division acknowledges their different roles while affirming their unity. The light inside the chum changes throughout the day and with the seasons. During the brief summer, when the sun circles the sky without setting, the light that filters through the hide is bright and constant, though still muted and golden compared to the harsh light outside. The interior is never fully bright, but it is well lit, and the family can see clearly to do their work. The door flap is often left open during the warmest parts of summer, allowing fresh air to flow through, creating a cross breeze that helps keep the interior comfortable. During the winter, especially during the polar night when the sun does not rise for weeks or months, the light inside is dim at all times. Even at midday, when there is a faint grey glow on the horizon, the light that penetrates the hide is barely enough to see by. The fire becomes the primary source of light. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating patterns that shift and change with every flicker. The smoke hole at the top is a circle of darkness or faint starlight, depending on the cloud cover and the presence of the moon or aurora. The quality of light affects the mood and rhythm of life inside the chum. In the bright days of summer, the family's more active, more energetic. They move around more, they work on larger projects, they come and go from the chum more frequently. In the dark days of winter, the family's quieter, more subdued. They move less, they speak more softly, they spend longer hours resting and sleeping. The light, or the lack of it, shapes the tempo of their days. At night, regardless of the season, the fire is the centre of everything. The family gathers around it, drawn by its warmth and light. They sit on the furs, their faces lit by the flickering flames, their backs to the darkness of the outer walls. The fire creates a circle of light and warmth, and within this circle the family is together, safe, protected. Beyond the circle, in the shadows, is the unknown, but it cannot reach them. The fire is a barrier, a guardian, a source of life. Life inside the chum is calm and measured. The family moves slowly, quietly. There is no need for haste. In the warmth of the chum there is time to rest, to talk, to work on small tasks. The women sew, their fingers moving with practiced efficiency, their needles catching the light from the fire. The men carve, shaving thin curls of bone from pieces of antler, shaping them into useful or beautiful objects. The children play, rolling on the soft furs, their voices low and gentle. They do not shout or run inside the chum. They have learned from their earliest days that this is a space of quiet, a space of respect. There is a sense of order and peace inside the chum. Everything has its place. Everyone knows their role. The rhythms of the day are predictable and comforting. Tea is made and drunk. Food is prepared and eaten. Work is done. Stories are told. Sleep comes. And then the cycle begins again. This predictability is not boring or oppressive. It is reassuring. It is a source of stability in a world that is chaotic and dangerous. The chum is the still point, the centre around which everything else revolves. To be inside the chum is to be held. The walls curve around you, enclosing you in a space that is neither too large nor too small. The warmth surrounds you, soaking into your skin, into your bones. The sounds are soft and familiar. The smells are comforting. The light is gentle. Every sense tells you that you are safe, that you are home, that you are where you are meant to be. The tundra outside may be vast and empty and cold, but inside the chum the world is small and full and warm. As the day draws to a close, the interior of the chum settles into its evening rhythm. The light outside fades, and the glow of the stove becomes the primary source of illumination. The family gathers around the fire, not in a formal arrangement, but naturally, drawn by the warmth and the light. This is the time for tea, for quiet conversation, for the small tasks that fill the hours before sleep. The evening is the heart of the day, the time when the family is most fully together, when the work of the day is done and the demands of the next day have not yet arrived. The transition from day to evening is gradual and gentle. There is no sudden shift, no alarm or announcement. The light simply fades, or in the case of the polar night, the dim grey of midday darkens to the black of night. The family senses this change without needing to mark it. Their bodies, attuned to the subtle rhythms of light and dark, know when the day is ending. They begin to move toward the centre of the chum, toward the fire, leaving behind the outer edges where they may have been working or resting during the day. The first task of the evening is tea. Tea is central to life in the chum. It is not just a beverage. It is a ritual, a comfort, and a necessity. In the extreme cold of the tundra, staying hydrated is essential, and hot liquids help maintain body temperature. The Nenets brew their tea strong, often adding salt or a small piece of butter or fat. The result is a rich, warming drink that provides both hydration and calories. It is not tea as most people know it. It is something more substantial, almost a soup, a liquid that carries nutrition and warmth in equal measure. The tea is brewed in a kettle or pot set directly on the stove. The water is melted from snow or ice, scooped from a container kept near the entrance where the cold keeps it frozen. The woman takes a handful of snow and places it in the kettle, then sets the kettle on the hottest part of the stove. The snow begins to melt almost immediately, hissing and steaming as it turns to water. Once there is enough water in the kettle, she adds the tea, a handful of leaves or herbs, and lets it steep. The smell of it fills the chum, mixing with the wood smoke and the scent of the hides, creating an atmosphere that is deeply comforting. When the tea is ready, she pours it into cups or small bowls, one for each member of the family. She adds a pinch of salt to each cup, stirring it in with a wooden spoon. In winter, she may also add a small piece of butter or a shaving of reindeer fat, which melts into the hot liquid, creating an oily sheen on the surface. This addition makes the tea richer, more sustaining, and it helps the body stay warm. The fat carries calories that are burned slowly, providing energy through the long, cold night. The family drinks from the cups, holding them in both hands to warm their fingers. The cups are warm to the touch, almost hot, and the heat seeps into the skin, into the bones. They sip slowly, savouring the warmth, the taste, the ritual. There is no rush. The evening is long, and there is nowhere else to be. Outside, the wind may be rising, the temperature falling, but inside, the world is small and safe. The conversation, if there is any, is quiet. The Nenets are not a loud people. Their voices are soft, modulated, suited to the small space of the chum where sound carries easily. They speak of the day just past, of the herd, of what needs to be done tomorrow. The man might mention a reindeer that seemed lame, or a section of the herd that wandered too far and needed to be brought back. The woman might speak of the work she completed, a coat that is now repaired, a pair of boots that are ready to be worn again. Stories are told, simple anecdotes about something seen on the tundra, a fox that crossed their path, a raven that followed them for a while, curious and bold. These stories are not elaborate or dramatic. They are quiet observations, small moments that are worth sharing. The children listen, their eyes bright in the firelight, and sometimes they ask questions. Where was the fox going? Why did the raven follow? The parents answer patiently, weaving the observations into lessons about the land, about the animals, about how to read the signs of the tundra. Laughter, when it comes, is soft. A smile, a quiet chuckle, a shared moment of amusement. The humour is gentle, often self-deprecating, never cruel. The family teases each other lightly, affectionately. A child might mimic the way their father walks, exaggerating his stride, and the father will laugh and shake his head. The mother might comment on a particularly crooked stitch she made, and the family will smile. These small moments of levity are important. They bind the family together, they release tension, they remind everyone that even in the harshness of the tundra there is room for joy. As the family drinks their tea, the work of the evening begins. For the women, this is almost always sewing. Sewing is not a task that is ever truly finished. Clothing made from reindeer hide is incredibly durable, but it is not indestructible. The stitching can come loose, especially at stress points like the knees of trousers or the elbows of coats. The hide itself can tear, caught on a sharp edge or worn through by constant use. Repairs must be made before the damage worsens, before a small tear becomes a large hole, before a loose seam opens completely. The woman sits with her sewing kit beside her, a small bundle wrapped in hide or fabric. She unwraps it carefully, revealing needles made from bone, polished smooth by years of use, and a spool of sinew thread, the strong, flexible fibre taken from the back or legs of reindeer. She selects a needle, threads it with a length of sinew, and brings out the garment that needs repair. It might be a militsa, one of the long hooded coats that are essential for winter survival. It might be a pair of tobogki, the boots made from reindeer leg skin which must be kept in perfect condition to prevent frostbite. She examines the garment by the light of the fire, her fingers running over the seams, feeling for places where the stitching has loosened or the hide has thinned. When she finds a spot that needs attention, she begins to work. Her fingers move with practiced efficiency. She does not need to watch her hands closely. The work is familiar, almost automatic. She can sew and talk and sip tea all at once, her attention divided but her skill undiminished. The stitching is small and tight, each stitch placed precisely. The sinew thread is strong, but it must be pulled tight to ensure the seam will hold. She works the needle through the thick hide using a smooth rocking motion that drives the needle through without tearing the material. The work is rhythmic, almost meditative. Insert the needle, pull the thread through, insert the needle again, pull the thread tight, over and over the same motion until the seam is closed, until the tear is mended, until the garment is whole again. Sometimes, if the repair is more extensive, she will need to add a patch. She cuts a piece of hide from her scraps, a collection of small pieces saved from previous projects, and shapes it to fit over the damaged area. She sews the patch in place, her stitches going all the way around the edge, securing it firmly. The patch will be visible, a slightly different shade or texture than the surrounding hide, but this does not matter. Function is more important than appearance. The garment must keep the wearer warm and dry. That is all that matters. While the woman sews, the man engages in his own work. Carving is a common evening activity, a task that is both practical and artistic. Reindeer antler, shed naturally by the animals each year, is collected and saved. It is a dense, hard material, excellent for making buttons, knife handles, toggles, and decorative items. A man may sit with a piece of antler and a sharp knife, shaving away thin curls of bone, shaping the material slowly. The work requires focus, but it is also meditative. The rhythm of the knife, the gradual transformation of the raw antler into something useful or beautiful, is satisfying. The man holds the antler in one hand, turning it slowly, examining it from all angles. He decides what he wants to make, a button perhaps, or a toggle for a coat. He begins to cut away the excess material, working slowly and carefully. Antler is hard, and it does not forgive mistakes. A careless cut can ruin hours of work. The knife is sharp, honed on a whetstone until the edge is fine enough to shave the hairs on his arm. He draws the knife along the surface of the antler, and a thin curl of bone peels away, falling to the furs at his feet. Another cut, another curl. Slowly the shape begins to emerge. The antler, which was rough and irregular, becomes smooth and symmetrical. The button takes form, round and flat, with a hole in the centre for the thread. When the carving is finished, he smooths it further, rubbing it with a piece of fine-grained stone or a bit of leather until the surface is polished and glossy. The finished piece is beautiful in its simplicity, functional but also pleasing to the eye. He sets it aside with the others he's made, a small collection that will be sewn onto coats and bags when they are needed. Nothing is wasted. Every piece of antler, every scrap of hide, every bit of sinew is used. The children are usually the last to settle. They play quietly on the furs, rolling and tumbling, their energy gradually winding down as the warmth and the dim light make them drowsy. Their games are simple, often involving small carved figures, animals made from scraps of wood or bone, a reindeer, a fox, a sled dog. They move these figures across the furs, creating imaginary journeys, imaginary hunts, imaginary migrations. They narrate their games in whispers, their voices soft and sing-song. The parents do not scold them for playing. Childhood in the chum is gentle. The children are safe here, and they are allowed to be children, to move and explore within the confines of the tent. The chum is their entire world for much of the year, and they know every inch of it. They know where the sacred space is and they avoid it. They know where their parents keep their tools, and they do not touch them without permission. They know the rules and they follow them, not out of fear but out of respect and love. Eventually their play slows. The movements become less energetic, more languid. One child lies down on the furs, still holding a carved reindeer, their eyes heavy. Another follows, curling up beside their sibling. The parents watch this with quiet satisfaction. The children are healthy, they are warm, they are content. This is what matters. This is the measure of a good life on the tundra. As the evening deepens, the family begins to prepare for sleep. The woman brings out the sleeping furs, the thick, soft blankets made from the best winter hides. These are kept folded during the day, stored near the wall where they are out of the way. Now she unfolds them and spreads them over the furs that cover the floor, creating layers of softness and warmth. The sleeping furs are heavier than the ones used during the day, with longer, denser hair that traps more air and provides more insulation. The man tends to the stove one last time. He opens the door and looks at the fire. It is burning well, but it needs to last through the night. He adds several pieces of wood, larger pieces that will burn slowly, and he adjusts the damper, reducing the airflow to slow the combustion. The flames settle down, burning low and steady. The stove will radiate a gentle warmth through the night, keeping the interior of the chum comfortable without needing to be tended. The family makes a final trip outside if needed, stepping through the door, flap into the cold to relieve themselves before bed. The cold is shocking after the warmth of the chum, and they do not linger. They return quickly, shaking off the chill, and settle back inside. The door flap is tied securely, and the chum is sealed for the night. When it is time to sleep, the family does not retreat to separate rooms or beds. There are no rooms in the chum, no private chambers, no walls to divide one space from another. The family sleeps together, as they have always slept, as their parents and grandparents slept before them. This is not a hardship or an imposition. It is simply how life is lived in the chum. The family is a unit, and they rest together, protected by the same walls, warmed by the same fire. The sleeping arrangement is simple and practical. The family lies down in a line, parallel to each other. Their bodies are lined along the length of the furs. Their heads are toward the outer wall of the chum, where the sloped hide meets the floor. Their feet point toward the centre, toward the gentle warmth of the stove. This arrangement ensures that everyone benefits equally from the heat. The stove radiates warmth in all directions, and by sleeping with their feet toward it, the family stays comfortable through the night. The feet, which are most vulnerable to cold, are kept warm, while the head, which produces the most heat, is in the slightly cooler area near the wall. The furs beneath them are soft and insulating. The furs covering them are warm and heavy. The space between the bodies, close together but not touching, creates additional warmth. The air trapped between the furs and the bodies acts as insulation, preventing heat from escaping. In the extreme cold of the tundra, this communal sleeping arrangement is both traditional and practical. Body heat is conserved. No one is left cold and alone. The family is together, protected, safe. The children sleep in the middle between the parents. This is the warmest spot and also the safest. The parents can reach out and touch their children in the night, reassuring themselves that everyone is well. The children, for their part, are comforted by the presence of their parents on either side. They are never afraid in the night, never lonely, never cold. They are held by the family, by the furs, by the chum itself. As they settle into sleep, the sounds of the chum become a lullaby. The fire crackles softly in the stove, a gentle, irregular rhythm. The wind outside, muffled by the thick hide and the layers of fur, is a high, distant whisper. Occasionally there is the faint sound of snow brushing against the outside of the tent, a gentle hiss like sand on fabric. Inside, the air is warm and still. The breathing of the family, slow and rhythmic, blends with the quiet sounds of the fire and the wind. There is nothing urgent, nothing demanding. The day is over. The night has come. The breathing deepens. The bodies relax. Sleep comes easily in the warmth and the darkness and the safety of the chum. The children fall asleep first. They're small. Bodies growing still, their breathing deep and even. The parents follow soon after, their bodies tired from the work of the day, their minds quiet. There are no thoughts of tomorrow, no worries about what might come. There is only the present, the warmth, the softness of the furs, the gentle crackle of the fire. The chum holds them through the night. The fire burns low, a steady glow that never goes out. The hide walls keep the wind at bay. The furs keep the cold from seeping up from the frozen ground. The family sleeps safe and warm while outside the tundra stretches away into the darkness, vast and empty and cold. The small conical home on the vast tundra holds them safe. And so, for now, they rest. The purga does not announce itself. It arrives. One moment the tundra is cold but calm, the wind steady but manageable. The next, the air is filled with a roaring chaos of ice and snow. The purga is a horizontal assault, a wall of wind so strong that it erases the landscape. Visibility drops to nothing. The line between the ground and the sky disappears. Everything becomes white. For those caught outside, the purga is a death sentence. There is no shelter on the open tundra, no place to hide. The wind is so cold and so strong that it strips heat from the body in minutes. Frostbite sets in quickly. Disorientation follows. People have been known to freeze to death within sight of their camp, unable to see or hear through the storm, wandering in circles until they collapse. The purga shows no mercy, but inside the chum the family is safe. They hear the wind building in the late afternoon, the low moan rising gradually to a high shriek. The sound changes. It becomes sharper, more urgent. The first pellets of snow begin to strike the hide, a sound like sand being thrown against fabric. The family recognizes these signs. They have heard them before many times. This is the moment the chum was designed for. This is the test it was built to pass. There is no panic, no rushing to secure anything. The chum is already secure. The enyuk is already tied. The chest is already positioned to manage the smoke hole flaps. The family goes about their evening routines, making tea, eating, preparing for sleep. The storm outside is not their concern. The chum will handle it. The wind strikes the tent from all sides, but it finds no purchase. The smooth, sloped sides of the cone offer no resistance. The wind flows up and around, unable to catch or lift. The weight of the nayak, hundreds of pounds of reindeer hide, holds the structure firmly in place. The poles, braced against each other and pressed into the ground by the weight of the covering, do not shift. The chum does not sway or creak. It simply stands, solid and immovable, while the storm rages around it. The family drinks their tea. The children sit close to their mother, not frightened, but aware that something significant is happening outside. The father tends to the stove, adding a few pieces of wood. He adjusts the chest from inside, using the long pole to shift the smoke flaps slightly, ensuring the smoke continues to draw properly despite the changing wind direction. The fire burns steadily. The smoke rises and escapes. The system continues to work. As the first hour passes, the wind intensifies. The sound becomes a constant, high-pitched shriek, punctuated by occasional deeper gusts that shake the air itself. The snow is no longer falling. It is flying horizontally, driven by the wind with such force that it seems to be moving in waves across the tundra. But inside, the family is insulated from this violence. The thick hide muffles the sound. The roar becomes a high, distant keen, present but not overwhelming. The family finishes their tea. The woman brings out her sewing. There is always sewing to be done. A tear in a boot that needs patching. A seam on a coat that has come loose. Her fingers work the needle and sinew with practiced ease, barely needing to look at what she is doing. The rhythm of her work is calming. Pull the thread through. Pull it tight. Make the next stitch. Pull again. The man sits with a piece of reindeer antler carving slowly. The children play a quiet game with small carved pieces, moving them across the fur like animals across the tundra. Outside, the storm is doing its work. The wind, blowing horizontally across the open plain, begins to deposit snow around the base of the chum. At first, it is just a thin layer, barely noticeable. But as the minutes turn to hours, the snow builds. It piles up against the lower portion of the tent, forming a bank. The chum is working as it was designed to work. The cone shape causes the wind to drop its load at the base, creating a drift that wraps around the structure like an embrace. The family does not see this happening. They are inside, in the warmth, in the amber light of the fire. But they feel it. Slowly, subtly, the sound of the wind changes. The high shriek becomes slightly muffled. The drafts that occasionally stirred the air near the edges of the floor, where the hide meets the ground, grow still. The gaps are being sealed. The snow is doing what snow does best, insulating. 2 hours into the storm, the drift has risen halfway up the walls of the chum. 3 hours, and it is at the waist of the tent. The wind continues to howl, continues to drive the snow, but now the base of the chum is buried. Only the upper cone remains visible above the white bank. The smoke hole at the peak stays clear, high above the accumulating snow, a dark circle against the swirling white of the storm. The smoke continues to rise, a thin grey thread that is immediately torn apart and scattered by the wind. Inside, the temperature rises slightly, not dramatically, but enough to be noticed. The woman sets aside her sewing and reaches for the stove. She opens the door and looks at the fire. It is burning well, but it no longer needs to burn so hot. The snowbank outside is doing half the work now, trapping the warmth inside, preventing it from escaping through the base of the tent. She adds only a small piece of wood, just enough to keep the fire going, and closes the door. The stove glows gently in the centre of the space. The children are growing drowsy. Their play has slowed. They lie on the furs, their heads resting on rolled-up hides that serve as pillows. Their eyes are heavy. The warmth, the dim light, the muffled sound of the wind, all of it conspires to lull them towards sleep. The mother brings out the sleeping furs, the thick, soft blankets made from the best winter hides. She spreads them over the children, tucking the edges around them. They murmur softly, already half asleep, and settle deeper into the warmth. The man continues his carving, but his movements are slower now. The piece he's working on is nearly finished. It is a small toggle, a button that will be sewn onto a coat. The antler is smooth under his fingers, worn to a soft sheen by the work of his knife. He shapes the final edge, tests it with his thumb and sets it aside. He puts away his knife and his tools, wrapping them carefully in a piece of hide and tucking them into their place on his side of the chum. The woman finishes her sewing. She ties off the thread, bites it clean with her teeth and examines her work. The seam is tight and even. The coat will hold. She folds it and places it with the other clothing, then sits for a moment listening. The wind is still howling, but it sounds different now. It is more distant, more abstract. The thick layer of snow around the base of the chum is dampening the sound, absorbing the vibrations. What had been a shriek is now a high, thin whisper, a sound that is almost soothing in its constancy. The family prepares for sleep. The man adds one more piece of wood to the stove, banking the fire so it will burn low and slow through the night. He adjusts the damper, reducing the airflow, and the flames settle into a gentle, steady glow. The stovepipe radiates a soft warmth. The woman arranges the furs, making sure everyone has enough covering. The family lies down in their line, heads toward the outer wall, feet toward the centre, toward the stove. The sounds of the chum at night during a blizzard are a kind of music. The fire crackles softly, a gentle, irregular rhythm. The wind outside is a constant high note, steady and unchanging. Occasionally there is the soft hiss of snow brushing against the hide, so faint it is barely audible. The breathing of the family, slow and deep, adds a bass rhythm. Together these sounds create a kind of lullaby, a soundscape of safety and warmth. The hours pass. The storm does not weaken. If anything, it intensifies. The wind speed increases. The temperature outside drops further, reaching 50 below, then further still. The snow continues to fall and blow, reshaping the tundra, erasing every landmark, burying everything that stands above the surface. The world outside the chum is a white chaos, a maelstrom of ice and wind and darkness. But inside, the family sleeps. The drift around the base of the chum has now risen to the full height of the lower walls. The tent is buried almost completely, only the top third of the cone visible above the snow. The smoke hole remains clear, and the stove continues to burn, drawing air through the snowbank, air that arrives slightly warmed by its passage through the insulating barrier. The family is warmer now than they were when the storm began. The snow has made the chum into a snow cave, a hybrid structure that combines the strength of the frame with the insulating properties of the drift. Morning comes, though it is hard to tell, during the polar night. There is no sunrise, only a gradual, almost imperceptible lightening of the sky from black to deep grey. The family wakes slowly. The children stir first, as children do, their bodies tuned to wake with the faint change in the light that filters through the smoke hole. The mother wakes next, listening automatically for any sound of distress from the children, hearing none, and relaxing back into the furs for a few more minutes. The father wakes last, his eyes opening, his body still, assessing the sounds around him before he moves. The fire has burned down to coals. The father rises, moving carefully to avoid disturbing the others. He opens the stove door and adds wood, small pieces first to coax the coals back into flame, then larger pieces once the fire has taken hold. The wood catches quickly, and within minutes the stove is radiating warmth again. He fills a kettle with snow from a container near the door and sets it on the stove to melt. Water first, then tea. This is the rhythm of the morning. The storm is still raging. The wind has not stopped. The snow has not stopped. The world outside is still white chaos. But inside the chum, life continues as it always does. The family rises. They dress, pulling on their warmest clothing, their militsas and tobocki, even though they will not be going outside. The clothing is part of the morning routine, a way of marking the beginning of the day. They sit on the furs around the stove, waiting for the water to boil. When the tea is ready, the mother pours it into cups, adding salt and a small piece of fat to each one. The family drinks, warming their hands on the cups, sipping slowly. There is no conversation. The morning is a quiet time, a time for waking slowly, for letting the body and mind adjust to the new day. The children drink their tea, and then begin to play quietly, the same games they played the night before. The man begins to work on another piece of carving. The woman checks the food stores, taking stock of what they have, planning the meals for the day. The day passes slowly. There is no urgency, no schedule to keep. The storm outside dictates their rhythm now. They cannot go out. They cannot move. They can only wait. But this is not a hardship. This is simply life on the tundra. Storms come, and you wait for them to pass. The chum provides everything they need: warmth, shelter, a place to rest. The family has food, dried meat and fish, a bit of flour for making simple flatbread on the stove. They have water, melted from snow. They have each other. Midday arrives, though again it is hard to mark. The light through the smoke hole remains a dim, grey glow. The family eats a simple meal: meat warmed on the stove, a piece of flatbread, more tea. The meal is quiet, consumed without much talk. Afterward, the children nap, curled together on the furs like puppies. The man continues his carving. The woman tends to the fire, adding wood as needed, adjusting the damper to maintain a steady temperature. The afternoon stretches long. The storm does not weaken. The wind continues its high, constant keen. The snow continues to pile against the chum, the drift now so high that the tent is buried almost to the smoke hole. Only the very peak of the cone is visible, a small triangle of hide rising from a vast white mound. From a distance, if anyone were foolish enough to be out in the storm, the chum would be nearly invisible, just another drift in a landscape of drifts. But inside, the family is sealed in warmth. The snowbank, now several feet thick on all sides, has created a cocoon. The temperature inside is comfortable, warm enough that the family does not need to huddle close to the fire. The air is still and quiet. The sound of the wind has been reduced to almost nothing, a faint vibration more felt than heard. It is as if the storm is happening in another world, a distant place that cannot touch them. Evening comes, the light through the smoke hole fades to black. The family lights a small lamp, a simple wick floating in seal oil, though they do not really need it. The glow from the stove is enough. They eat again, another simple meal, and then they settle in for the night. The routine is the same as the night before: carving, sewing, quiet play, and then sleep. The fire is banked, the furs are arranged. The family lies down in their line. The second night in the storm is even quieter than the first. The snow has absorbed every sound. The wind is a memory, a faint presence that barely registers. The breathing of the family, the soft crackle of the fire, these are the only sounds. The chum has become a womb, a place of absolute safety, a small pocket of life and warmth in the midst of the frozen chaos of the tundra. The storm lasts 3 days. 3 days of wind and snow, 3 days of darkness and cold. But inside the chum, time moves differently. The family does not count the hours. They do not mark the days. They simply exist, in the warmth, in the safety, in the quiet rhythm of tea and food and sleep. The storm is outside. They are inside. That is all that matters. On the morning of the 4th day, the wind stops. The change is sudden. The family wakes to silence. Not the muffled silence of the storm, but true silence. The absence of sound. The father rises and goes to the entrance, pushing aside the flap of hide. He is met with a wall of snow packed solid against the door. He takes a broad, flat piece of wood and begins to dig, pushing the snow out and away, carving a tunnel through the drift. It takes time. The snow is dense and heavy, but eventually he breaks through to the outside. The world has been transformed. The landscape is unrecognizable. Drifts rise and fall in smooth, wind-carved shapes. What were flat plains are now rolling hills of snow. What were small rises are now buried and invisible. The sky is clear, a deep, cold blue. The stars are fading as the first faint glow of dawn appears on the horizon. The air is still. The silence is profound, almost overwhelming after 3 days of constant noise. The family emerges slowly, one by one, into this new world. They brush the snow from the nyuk, and it falls away easily, as it always does, the fur-out design having kept it powdery and loose. The hide beneath is dry and intact. The poles have not shifted. The structure is exactly as it was before the storm began, buried and then revealed, unchanged, enduring. The chum has done its job. It has kept the family warm and safe through 3 days of blizzard conditions. It has cooperated with the storm, allowed itself to be buried, and in doing so it became warmer, quieter, safer. The family stands in the cold, clear air, looking at the transformed tundra, and then they turn back to the chum. There is work to do. The sledges are buried and must be dug out. The reindeer must be checked and gathered. But for now, for this moment, they simply stand and breathe the clean, cold air, grateful for the shelter that has held them through the storm. As winter begins to loosen its grip, the rhythm of life on the tundra shifts. The change is subtle at first, barely perceptible, but it is there. The days grow longer, though the cold remains. The polar night ends, and the sun, which has been absent for months, reappears on the horizon. At first it is just a faint glow, a pale orange line that appears for a few minutes at midday and then vanishes. The next day, it lasts a little longer. The day after that, longer still. Each day the sun climbs a little higher, stays a little longer, until finally it breaks fully above the horizon, and the tundra is bathed once more in pale, slanting rays that stretch for miles across the snow. This light is different from the light of summer. It is cold light, sharp and clear, without warmth. The temperature remains far below freezing, and the wind is still bitter. But the light itself is a signal, a message that the season is changing. The Nenets feel this change in their bones. They do not need calendars or watches to tell them when it is time to move. They read the signs in the sky, in the behaviour of the reindeer, in the quality of the snow beneath their feet. The reindeer sense it too. They have spent the winter in the southern forest tundra, where sparse trees offer some shelter, and the snow is not as deep, making it easier to reach the lichen beneath. But now, as the light returns, they begin to grow restless. They lift their heads more often, looking north. They move more during the day, grazing less, walking more. Their internal clock, calibrated by millennia of evolution, tells them it is time to move north, back to the open tundra, toward the coast, toward the summer calving grounds. The Nenets, attuned to every nuance of their herd's behaviour, recognize these signs. The family begins to prepare for the migration. This is not a sudden decision or a rushed departure. It is a gradual process, a series of preparations that take days or even weeks. Equipment must be checked. Food stores must be organised. The chum must be readied for dismantling. Everything must be in order before the journey can begin. The men walk through the herd, examining each animal. They look for signs of illness or injury, checking hooves, checking coats, checking the general health and condition of each reindeer. Any animal that is lame or sick will slow the entire migration, and decisions must be made. Sometimes an animal can be treated, given extra care and attention until it recovers. Sometimes, if the injury or illness is severe, the animal must be slaughtered. It is a hard decision, but it is a necessary one. The meat will not be wasted. It will feed the family and be preserved for the journey. The sledges are brought out and inspected carefully. These sledges have been used all winter carrying loads from camp to camp, and they have taken a beating. The runners, which glide across the snow, are examined for cracks or splits. Wood can become brittle in the extreme cold, and a runner that looks fine might have hidden stress fractures that will fail under load. Any damaged runners are replaced or repaired. The lashings, the ropes and straps that hold the sledges together are checked. Anything that shows wear is replaced with fresh cordage. The sledges themselves are works of simple, elegant engineering. They are long and narrow, built from carefully shaped wood, with upward curving runners at the front that allow them to glide over obstacles and rough snow. The frame is flexible, able to twist and bend as it moves over uneven ground, which prevents it from breaking under stress. There are no nails or metal fasteners. Everything is lashed together with rope, which allows the sledge to flex and also makes repairs easier. The women organise the household goods, sorting through everything the family owns, deciding what must be carried and what can be left behind or discarded. There is no room for unnecessary weight. Every item must justify its place on the sledges. Food is packed carefully, dried meat and fish wrapped in hide, flour sealed in waterproof bags, tea stored in containers that will keep it dry. Clothing is checked and folded, the winter garments that will still be needed, and the summer garments that will be needed when they reach the northern tundra. The chum, which has been home for weeks or months in one spot, must be taken down. This is done with the same practiced efficiency with which it was built, but the process is reversed. The family works together. The stove is allowed to cool, which takes several hours. It cannot be moved while it is hot, so the fire is let to die down the evening before, and by morning the metal is cool enough to handle. The stove is carefully disassembled, the stovepipe removed and packed, the body of the stove wrapped in protective material to prevent damage during transport. The furs that cover the floor are rolled up and tied with the rope. Each roll is heavy, but they are essential, and they will be needed again at the next camp. The poles that form the base layer of the floor are gathered and stacked. The enyuk is unwrapped from the frame, the ropes untied, the heavy hide folded section by section. This is work that requires care. The enyuk must not be torn or damaged. It must be folded properly so that it does not develop permanent creases that might weaken the hide. The poles are taken down one by one. The process is the reverse of construction. The women work together, supporting the structure as the poles are removed, ensuring that nothing collapses suddenly or falls. The poles are heavy, and they must be lowered carefully. When all the other poles have been removed, the sacred poles are taken down last. They are handled with particular care, never dropped, never left lying carelessly on the ground. They are wrapped in protective covering and tied together, ready to be loaded onto the sledge. When the chum has been completely dismantled, what remains is only the dark circle on the snow where the tent stood. The snow here is compressed and discoloured, marked by soot from the stove and the traces of daily life. But within days, new snow will fall, or the wind will redistribute what is there, and the circle will fade. In a few weeks, it will be invisible. The family has left their mark, but it is a temporary mark, a mark that the land will erase and reclaim. The sledges are loaded methodically. The poles go on one sledge, lashed securely lengthwise along the runners. They are long and heavy, and they must be balanced properly or the sledge will be difficult to pull. The nuke, folded and wrapped, goes on another sledge. It is the heaviest single item the family owns, and it requires a strong reindeer to pull it. The household goods are distributed among the remaining sledges, the weight balanced carefully so that no single animal is overburdened. The family climbs onto the sledges as well. The women and children often ride, especially at the beginning of the day when everyone is fresh. They bundle themselves in their fur coats and blankets, settling into spaces among the packed goods. The men may ride or walk, depending on the terrain and the condition of the herd. They position themselves where they can guide the reindeer and watch over the herd as it moves. The reindeer are harnessed to the sledges. This is done with practiced ease. Each reindeer knows its job. They have been pulling sledges since they were young, trained gradually to accept the harness and to respond to the commands of the herder. The harness is simple, made from rope and hide, designed to distribute the weight of the load across the animal's chest and shoulders. The reindeer leans into the harness and the sledge begins to move. The caravan forms. It is a long line of sledges and people and animals stretching across the snow. The family's sledges are joined by those of other families who have camped nearby, and the line grows longer. There is safety in numbers, and the families prefer to travel together when they can. The migration begins slowly, the reindeer moving at their own pace, the sledges gliding smoothly over the packed snow. The first day of travel sets the rhythm for all the days that will follow. The reindeer do not rush. They move at a steady, unhurried walk, their heads lowering occasionally to sniff at the snow, checking for lichen beneath. They are not driven hard. The nenets know that the journey is long, and the animals must pace themselves. There will be many days of travel ahead, and the reindeer must stay healthy and strong. The pace of travel is determined entirely by the herd. The sledges follow, and the people follow. There is no forcing, no pushing. If the reindeer want to stop and graze, they stop. The family waits, patient, watching the herd spread out across the snow, digging with their hooves, pulling up mouthfuls of lichen. The grazing might last for an hour, or it might last for several hours. When the reindeer have eaten their fill, they begin to move again, and the journey continues. The landscape moves past slowly. The forest tundra, with its sparse, stunted trees, gradually gives way to more open terrain. The trees become fewer and smaller, until they disappear entirely and the land is flat and treeless, stretching away to the horizon. The snow is everywhere, but it is changing. The surface, which was hard and wind-packed in the deep winter, begins to soften slightly in the longer daylight. The sledges still glide smoothly, but there is a different quality to the movement, a slight drag that was not there before. The light changes as the day progresses. The sun, which rose low on the horizon in the morning, climbs higher as midday approaches. The shadows, which were long and blue in the early light, grow shorter. The temperature rises slightly, though it remains well below freezing. The air feels different, less sharp, less painful to breathe. The family can feel the change, subtle but real, a sign that winter is weakening its grip. Travel continues for several hours, then stops for rest. The reindeer need to rest, and so does the family. The sledges are halted and people climb down, stamping their feet to restore circulation, stretching their legs after sitting for so long. The children run around, releasing pent-up energy, their voices bright in the cold air. The adults check the sledges, ensuring that nothing has shifted or come loose. The reindeer are checked as well, their harnesses adjusted if needed. A small fire is sometimes built if there is fuel available. Dried willow branches, carried from the forest tundra, can be used to make a quick, hot fire. Water is melted from snow and tea is brewed. The family drinks, warming their hands on the cups, eating a simple meal of dried meat and flatbread. The meal is eaten standing or sitting on the sledges, not in the comfort of the chum. There is no time to erect the tent for a midday rest. The chum will be built only when the day's travel is done. The rest is brief, perhaps half an hour, perhaps an hour. Then the journey resumes. The reindeer are reharnessed, the family climbs back onto the sledges, and the caravan moves forward once more. The afternoon is much like the morning, the slow, steady pace, the endless white landscape, the sound of the runners gliding over snow, the creak of the sledges, the occasional call from the herders to guide the reindeer. The men walk alongside the herd or ride on reindeer, their eyes always moving, always watching. They watch for strays, for reindeer that wander too far from the main group. They watch the condition of the animals, looking for any sign of lameness or distress. They watch the horizon, looking for landmarks, for signs of other herds, for any indication of danger. The work of herding during migration is constant and exhausting, requiring focus and attention every moment. As the afternoon wears on, the light begins to change again. The sun, which had climbed to its zenith, begins to descend toward the horizon. The shadows lengthen, the air grows colder. The family begins to watch for a suitable place to camp. They look for flat ground, firm snow, some protection from the wind if possible, though on the open tundra, true protection is rare. When a good spot is found, the caravan halts. The day's travel is done. The family has covered perhaps 10 kilometres, perhaps 20, depending on the terrain and the behaviour of the herd. Some days, if the reindeer are restless and move quickly, the distance is greater. Other days, if the herd stops frequently to graze, or if the snow is difficult, the distance is less. The Nenets do not measure distance in kilometres. They measure it in time, in the rhythm of the day, in the needs of the herd. The sledges are unloaded, not completely, but enough to access the poles and the nyuk. The chum must be built before darkness falls, before the temperature drops too far, before the family loses the will and energy to do the work. The women begin immediately, their movements practiced and efficient. They have built this tent hundreds of times, and they will build it hundreds of times more. The process is automatic, requiring no thought, only action. The poles are unlashed and laid out. The 2 sacred poles are brought first, and a third pole is selected. The 3 are raised together into the tripod, and the structure begins to grow. One by one, the other poles are added, fanning out to form the circle of the cone. The skeleton rises from the snow, taking shape quickly, and within 20 minutes the frame is complete. The nuke is brought and lifted, draped over the frame, wrapped and secured. The chest is positioned. The floor is prepared, poles laid down, furs spread out. The stove is brought in and assembled, the stovepipe fitted through the smoke hole. Wood is brought and a fire is lit. The smoke begins to rise, a thin grey thread against the darkening sky. The chum is complete. What was a pile of materials on the snow an hour ago is now a warm, enclosed space. The family can step inside, out of the wind, out of the cold, and into the shelter of home. Inside, the routine is the same as it has always been. Tea is brewed, food is prepared and eaten. The family sits around the fire, warming themselves, resting after the long day of travel. The children play quietly, tired but content. The adults tend to their tasks, sewing, carving, preparing for sleep. The stove radiates its gentle warmth, and the interior of the chum becomes a sanctuary, a place of safety and comfort. Outside, the wind may rise, the temperature falls as night comes on, but inside, the family is protected. They sleep in their line, feet toward the fire, wrapped in their furs. The sounds of the night are the same sounds they have heard for generations. The crackle of the fire, the whisper of the wind, the breathing of the family. The chum holds them safe through the night. In the morning, the process begins again. The family wakes with the light, tea is made, A simple breakfast is eaten, then the chum is taken down, the poles are bundled, the enyuk is folded, the sledges are loaded, the reindeer are harnessed, and the journey continues. This pattern repeats day after day. Break camp in the morning, travel through the day, stopping when the herd wants to stop, moving when the herd wants to move. Make camp in the evening, build the chum, eat, sleep, wake, dismantle the chum, travel again. The rhythm is steady, predictable, almost meditative. There is no variety, no excitement, only the slow, constant movement across the tundra. The landscape changes gradually as they move north. The sparse trees of the forest tundra are left behind completely. The land becomes flatter, more open, more exposed. The snow begins to show signs of melting at the edges. Small patches of bare ground appear, dark and wet, where the sun has been strong enough to melt through the snow cover. The air smells different, carrying with it the faint scent of wet earth and growing things, though the growing has not yet begun. The light changes as well. Each day the sun rises a little higher, stays a little longer. The days grow noticeably longer, the nights noticeably shorter. Within a week of travel there are several hours of true daylight each day. Within 2 weeks the sun is barely setting at all, just dipping below the horizon for a few hours before rising again. The light is constant and the family's sense of time begins to shift. Day and night blur together. Sleep comes when they are tired, not when darkness falls. The temperature rises slowly. It is still cold, still well below freezing, but the worst of the winter cold is passing. The wind, which had been so brutal and constant, begins to ease. There are days when the air is almost still, when the only sound is the crunch of the sledges on the snow and the soft grunting of the reindeer. These are good days, days when travel is easier, when the family can relax slightly, when the children can ride on the sledges without needing to be wrapped in layer upon layer of fur. The family passes other landmarks, other signs. They cross frozen rivers, the ice still thick and solid but showing cracks at the edges where the water beneath is beginning to flow. They pass rocky outcrops, dark stone breaking through the snow, familiar markers that tell them where they are, how far they have come. They see the tracks of other animals, foxes and hares, the first signs of wildlife returning to the open tundra after the long winter. They encounter other families, other herds. The tundra, which had seemed empty and lifeless, reveals itself to be crisscrossed with paths, with the routes of other nomadic families making the same journey north. Sometimes the families travel together for a few days, their herds mingling, their camps set up side by side. There is conversation in the evenings, news shared, stories told. Then, thus, families part again, each taking a slightly different route, heading toward their own preferred summer grounds. The reindeer grow more energetic as they move north. They can sense the coast ahead, can sense the summer pastures. Their pace quickens slightly. They are less interested in grazing, more interested in moving. The herders must work harder to keep them from moving too fast, to prevent them from exhausting themselves. The journey is long, and the animals must save their strength. The snow begins to soften more noticeably. The surface, which had been hard and crusty, becomes wet during the warmest part of the day. The sledges, which had glided so smoothly, begin to drag. Travel becomes harder, requiring more effort from the reindeer. The family adjusts, travelling more in the early morning and late evening when the temperature is lower and the snow is firmer, resting during the middle of the day when the snow is soft. Water begins to appear on the surface of the snow. Small pools form in depressions, meltwater from the sun's heat pooling where it cannot drain. The reindeer drink from these pools, their first access to liquid water in months. The family fills containers as well, grateful not to have to melt snow for every cup of tea. The water is cold and clear, tasting of nothing but itself, pure and clean. The wind shifts, coming now from the north instead of the south. It carries with it the smell of the sea, a faint salty scent that is unmistakable. The family knows this smell. It means they are getting close. The coast is ahead, perhaps a few days away, perhaps a week. The reindeer know it too. They quicken their pace even more, their heads lifted, their nostrils flaring as they catch the scent of the ocean. The landscape begins to change more dramatically. The flat, featureless plain gives way to gentle rolling hills. The snow becomes patchy, with more and more bare ground showing through. The The ground itself is dark and wet, the permafrost beginning to thaw at the surface. The sledges, which had been gliding over snow, now bump and jolt over rough ground. Travel becomes slower, more difficult. The family must choose their route carefully, staying on snow when they can, navigating around the worst of the mud. Birds begin to appear, the first migrants returning from the south. Gulls circle overhead, their cries sharp and plaintive. Geese fly in formation, heading north to their breeding grounds. The sky, which had been empty for so long, is suddenly full of life, full of movement, full of sound. The children point and laugh, excited by the sight of the birds, by this sign that summer is truly coming. The final days of the journey are the hardest. The reindeer are tired, worn down by weeks of travel. The sledges are harder to pull over the muddy, uneven ground. The family is tired as well, worn down by the constant packing and unpacking, the building and dismantling of the chum, the long days of travel. But they are close now. The smell of the sea is strong. The sound of waves can be heard in the distance, a low, constant rumble. And then, finally, they arrive. The land drops away slightly, and beyond it is the Arctic Ocean, a vast expanse of grey-blue water and floating ice. The coast is rocky and barren, swept clean by the wind, but it is beautiful in its harshness. The reindeer spread out along the shore, grazing on the sparse vegetation, drinking from the streams of meltwater, resting after their long journey. The calves, born along the way, wobble on the rocky ground, exploring their new surroundings. The family chooses a spot for their summer camp, a place with a view of the ocean, a place where the wind blows strong and constant, keeping the insects at bay. The chum is built one more time, the process unchanged despite the different landscape. The poles rise, the nuke is wrapped, the stove is lit. The smoke rises into the clear Arctic air, a signal that the family has arrived, that they are home, at least for now, at least for the summer. The journey has taken weeks. They have covered over 1,000 kilometres, moving slowly, steadily, following the reindeer, carrying their home with them. The family is tired, but they are safe. The reindeer are tired, but they are healthy. The migration is complete. The long winter is over. Summer, brief and bright and full of life, has begun. And in a few short months, when the days begin to shorten and the temperature begins to drop, they will pack up the chum once more and begin the journey south, back across the tundra, back to the forest edge, following the endless cycle of the seasons, the endless rhythm of life on the frozen plain. When the Nenets break camp, when the chum is dismantled and the sledges are loaded and the family moves on to the next place, they leave behind very little. The poles are gone, bundled and carried. The nuke is folded and packed. The stove is disassembled and loaded. The furs are rolled up. The food and tools are taken. What remains is only a mark on the ground, a compressed circle where the tent stood. This circle is darker than the surrounding snow or tundra. It is the imprint of the family's presence, the place where the floor of the chum pressed down on the ground, where feet walked, where the weight of the structure compacted the snow or soil. If the camp was on snow, the circle is a patch of harder, denser snow, stained slightly by soot from the stove, marked by the traces of daily life. If the camp was on the bare tundra in summer, the circle is a patch of flattened grass and trampled earth, the vegetation crushed and the soil compacted. This is the only evidence that a family lived here. There are no foundations left behind, no remnants of walls, no piles of refuse. The Nenets do not accumulate waste. Everything they use is either consumed, repaired, or carried with them. The family lives lightly on the land, taking only what they need, and leaving almost nothing behind. The dark circle is temporary. If the camp was on snow, the circle will vanish within days as new snow falls and the wind redistributes it, erasing the mark. If the camp was on the tundra, the grass will begin to recover within weeks. The compacted soil will loosen with the freeze and thaw cycles. By the next season, the circle will be faint or invisible, reclaimed by the land. In a few years, there will be no sign that anyone was ever there. This impermanence is fundamental to the Nenets' way of life. They do not seek to leave a permanent mark on the land. They do not build monuments or structures that will outlast them. Their presence is light, temporary, respectful. They pass through the landscape like the wind, like the migrating birds, like the reindeer themselves. They belong to the land, but they do not possess it. Yet even though the physical mark fades, the memory does not. The Nenets return to the same camping spots year after year, generation after generation. They know the good places, the spots where the snow is firm, where the wind is less severe, where the reindeer prefer to graze. These places are remembered, passed down through oral tradition, learned by children as they travel with their families. The land is mapped in memory and experience. A family will return to a spot they used the previous year, or 5 years ago, or that their grandparents used. They will recognise the place by the shape of the land, by the way the hills rise in the distance, by the bend of a stream or the pattern of rocks. They will set up their chum in the same place, or near it, and for a brief time that spot will be home again. Then they will leave, and the circle will fade, and the cycle will continue. This relationship with the land is different from the relationship cultivated by settled peoples. There is no ownership, no fences, no deeds or titles. The Nenets do not claim the land as theirs in the legal sense, but they know it intimately. They know its moods, its dangers, its gifts. They know where the lichen grows thickest, where the ice is safe to cross. This knowledge is their wealth, their inheritance, their connection to the past and the future. The dark circle represents the Nenets' presence on the land and their willingness to let go. It is a mark of respect, a recognition that the land is theirs to live with for a time. The circle fades, but the knowledge remains. The structure disappears, but the family continues. The chum is taken down, but the poles are carried, and the home will rise again in another place. The chum is not permanent in the way a house of stone or brick is permanent. It does not stand in one place for years or decades. It is built and dismantled hundreds of times over the course of a lifetime. Yet in another sense, the chum is far more enduring than any fixed structure. It is passed down through generations as knowledge. The poles are heirlooms. They are physical objects that carry the history of the family. A man receives his poles from his father, who received them from his father. They are cared for, protected, never abandoned. To lose a set of poles would be a tragedy, both for the effort required to replace them and for the severed connection to the past. The poles are the bones of the home, and they link each generation to the ones that came before. The newt carries tradition in the same way. The methods of preparing the hides, the patterns of stitching, the knowledge of how to orient the fur, all of this is passed from mother to daughter. A young girl watches her mother sew, learning by observation and by doing. She starts with small tasks, holding the hide, threading the sinew, and gradually she takes on more responsibility. By the time she's an adult, she has internalized the knowledge. Her hands know what to do without conscious thought. This transmission of knowledge is not written down. There are no manuals or instructions. The Nenets' culture is oral, passed through stories, songs, and practical demonstration. A child learns to build a chum by building one, over and over, until the process becomes second nature. They learn to read the weather by watching the sky, by feeling the wind, by listening to the stories of their elders. The chum is a repository of cultural knowledge. It embodies the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. Every aspect of its design, from the angle of the poles to the orientation of the fur, has been refined through trial and error, through success and failure, through the hard lessons of survival in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. This knowledge adapts over time. When metal stoves became available, the Nenets incorporated them into the chum, recognizing that they were more efficient than open fires. When canvas became available, some families began using it for the summer nuke, finding it lighter and easier to manage than birch bark. Yet the fundamental design of the chum has not changed. The cone remains, the poles remain, the principles remain. The thread that holds the Nenets together is the continuity of knowledge, the unbroken line of teaching and learning that stretches back through time. It is the stories told around the fire, the skills taught from parent to child, the shared understanding of what it means to live on the tundra, to follow the reindeer, to build a home that can travel. In a world that increasingly values permanence, fixed addresses and ownership, the Nenets' way of life stands as a counterpoint. They have survived for thousands of years by learning to move with the elements rather than building walls against them. They have thrived by carrying with them only what is essential rather than accumulating possessions. They have endured by living in harmony with the land rather than seeking to conquer it. The chum is the physical manifestation of this philosophy. It is a home that allows itself to be buried by the storm rather than resisting it. It is a structure that leaves only a fading circle rather than scarring the land. It is a dwelling that is carried rather than owned, enduring rather than permanent, free rather than fixed. We tend to think of home as a noun, as a place, a fixed point in space, a structure with walls and a roof, an address that can be written down and returned to. For most of human history, and for most people today, this is what home means. It is where you are from. It is where you go back to. It is the thing that stays while you move. For the Nenets, home is something different. Home is a place you return to, again and again, in a cycle that repeats across the seasons and across the generations. Home is the act of building the chum. Home is the family inside it. Home is the fire at the centre. Home is the ritual of setting up camp, of laying the furs, of lighting the stove, of drinking tea together as the wind whispers outside. Home is a verb. It is something you do. This understanding changes everything. It means that home can be anywhere, as long as the family is together and the rituals are maintained. It means that stability does not require permanence. It means that you can belong to a place without possessing it, that you can be rooted without being fixed in place. The chum makes this possible. Its design allows the family to carry their home with them, to recreate it wherever they go. The poles and the enyuk are always the same. The process of building is always the same. The interior geography, with the sea and the mayakaya, and the sleeping arrangement, is always the same. When the chum is erected, the family is home, whether they are on the southern forest tundra or the northern coast or anywhere in between. Life on the tundra is difficult. The cold is relentless. The work is constant. The dangers are real. Storms can kill. The life is hard in ways that most of us can barely imagine. Yet within that harshness, there is a kind of freedom. The Nenets are not bound to one place. They move with the seasons, with the herd, with the rhythms of the land. They live in a continuous present, always moving, always adapting, always rebuilding. And there is beauty in this life. The beauty of the tundra, vast and white and silent. The beauty of the aurora dancing in the winter sky. The beauty of the reindeer moving across the snow, a river of antlers and breath and life. The beauty of the chum rising from a pile of poles, of smoke curling up into the Arctic air, of a family sitting together by the fire, warm and safe while the blizzard rages outside. The chum teaches a lesson. It teaches that strength is sometimes about flexibility, about yielding, about allowing yourself to be covered and protected rather than exposed and battered. It teaches that home is about people rather than walls, about returning rather than staying, about presence rather than possession. The chum is a simple structure, poles and hide, yet it has carried the Nenets through millennia. It has sheltered them through countless blizzards, through the long darkness of the polar night, through the brief, bright summers. It has been their refuge, their centre, their home, and as long as the poles are passed down, as long as the knowledge is taught, as long as the family gathers around the fire in the centre of the cone, the chum will endure. We have travelled a long way tonight, across the frozen tundra, into the warmth of the chum, through blizzards and seasons and generations. We have seen how a simple tent, made from what the land provides, can become a home that survives the harshest conditions on earth. We have seen how a people can thrive by listening to the land, by moving with it, by building a shelter that cooperates with the storm rather than resisting it. The chum stands as a quiet testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. It reminds us that there are many ways to live, many ways to belong, many ways to be home. It whispers to us of a different relationship with the world, one built on movement and respect and return rather than permanence and ownership. Rest now. Let the image of the chum remain with you, a cone of warmth in the vast white, a thin wisp of smoke rising into the Arctic sky. Let the sound of the wind become a whisper, the sound of snow brushing gently against fur. Let yourself be held by the knowledge that somewhere, even now, families are sleeping in a line on soft furs, their feet toward the gentle warmth of the fire, while outside the endless tundra stretches away into the darkness. They are safe, they are home, and so, for now, are you.